My name is JT, and this is Seen and Heard. Hey guys, welcome to Seen and Heard. This is the podcast where we just can't help but tell others about what we have seen and heard God do in our life and in the lives of those around us. On today's show, we're going to go back and read the story of blind Bartimaeus one more time. Then we're going to engage our imaginations and just wonder what it was like when Jesus and that parade of people are coming through Jericho, and you got this blind guy on the outside of town. And then finally, I'm going to share a short story that I wrote, and it's written from the perspective as if blind Bartimaeus and you are having a conversation. And so he's sharing with you his experience since Jesus has healed him. And even though that is amazing, life can still be really tough. And we'll end our time together with a few prayer requests. All right, with that being everything, let's jump into the show. All right, Mark 10, 46 to 52. They came to Jericho, and as he was leaving Jericho with his disciples and a large crowd, Bartimaeus, the son of Timaeus, a blind beggar, was sitting by the road. When he heard that it was Jesus of Nazareth, he began to cry out, "Jesus, son of David, have mercy on me." Many warned him to keep quiet, but he was crying out all the more, "Have mercy on me, son of David." Jesus stopped and said, "Call him." So they called the blind man and said to him, "Have courage, get up, he's calling for you." He threw off his coat, jumped up, and came to Jesus. And Jesus answered him, "What do you want me to do for you?" "Rabboni." The blind man said to him, "I want to see." Jesus said to him, "Go, your faith has saved you." Immediately he could see and began to follow Jesus on the road. All right, now we're going to engage our imagination. So in order to do that, we're going to kind of just go through the five senses. What do we smell, taste, see, hear, feel? And so just using those, we want to almost experience this passage. I know this might be a little bit different for some, but there's nothing really crazy about it, actually. Just think about your next vacation. When you decide to go on vacation, you and whoever's going with you, you're going to kind of dream about it. You're going to imagine yourself there, and you're going to get excited about what you're going to do and what you're going to eat and how fun it's going to be. And here we're just going to engage your imagination much the same way and see if it helps us to see a little bit more of what's going on in this story. All right, so let's start off. What do we see? So in this story, it says that Jesus and his disciples and a large crowd are going through Jericho. And first off, what this reminds me of is like whenever he's feeding the 5,000 or 4,000, or he's preaching on the Sea of Galilee, like right on the coast there, it will say like large crowd. And then later on, it'll tell you like there's 500 or 5,000, people there. And so honestly, I don't think that this is like 25 people or 50 people even. There's hundreds of people that are following Jesus through Jericho, maybe thousands. Can you just imagine the parade of people that are going through Jericho? I think I see them having conversations. They're having fun. They're debating about different things all along the way. They're trying to see if they can get closer to Jesus. Maybe they can ask him a question. And then we hear about this guy on the outside of town. And so they've walked all the way through Jericho. My guess is Jesus probably talked to some people in Jericho. Maybe some people there started following him as well as he's on his way to Jerusalem. And on the outside of town is this guy, and he's begging. And you got to think that his clothing is ragged. He's dirty. Talk about smells, like he probably stinks. Yeah, so do you think that, I like to call him Bart, so like blind Bart, do you think that he's smiling and greeting everybody with pleasant words? Or do you think he's like despondent, depressed? He's having a hard time. Maybe he murmurs or says something, but it's not much because he knows that he's pretty insignificant and most people just ignore him. And I can just kind of see him there, almost probably in the way with such a crowd and people just walking all around him. He's probably hearing some of the conversations and, oh, I think this crowd is with Jesus. And so maybe then is when he starts like calling out for him and he starts yelling, Jesus, son of David, right? You got to think it's really hot. I don't know. Maybe there's a winter there. Some of you guys could probably tell me, but I just imagine it being hot. I see everything as being brown. When I think of him sitting on the ground, on the gravel with the rocks, kind of, you know, making his sitting and kneeling or whatever he's doing, like there's a lot of discomfort. It's hard to find a pleasant place to sit down out there with all the rocks. Again, as the crowd is going around Bartimaeus and he begins to hear the conversations, he starts to cry out. They just start yelling back at him to be quiet. He's so insignificant and such a problem that they're just like, hush, dude, like, let us just keep going. But finally, Jesus recognizes and he sees him and he calls him over. And so then they're like, hey, be encouraged. Like, come on, guy. And so he hops up. It says, like, he jumps up, which is interesting. Just thinking, like, if he's blind, what kind of jumping is he actually doing? That would actually might be interesting to see. And so then he comes over to Jesus and he just tells him, like, I want to see. And he calls him rabbi. He calls him like teacher, maybe even master. And Jesus says, you're saved. And from that moment, like, his eyes were opened. And the passage tells us that he followed Jesus. And so we don't know, like, did he pick up his things and then follow? Or did he leave everything there, but he didn't go back into town? I wonder what everybody in town would think when the blind guy outside that nobody really wanted to talk to or walk by might be like, the greeters at Walmart, or maybe even the, Salvation Army Santa Claus guy at Christmas time when you might go in through the other entrance. Can you imagine how much more a blind beggar on the outside town? And so, yeah, like, think about the emotional state of everyone there. Obviously, Jesus is abiding in the Father, and he is communing with the Father, and he is walking exactly where the Father wants him to go. But everybody around them, there's probably some anxiety, there's some fear, there's some excitement, there's probably a little bit of jealousy, like that guy's a little bit closer to talking to Jesus than I am. Like, there's like selfishness in their hearts, like, how do I get closer? And then there's some that have like truly tasted and seen that Jesus healed them that are in this crowd. Maybe they can even spot Bartimaeus and they're hoping that Jesus would heal him too. So the crowd is there's just a whole bunch of different things that are going on in the heads and hearts of those people. And Bartimaeus, like I said, is probably despondent and depressed, defeated. And then all of a sudden he starts hearing about this Jesus and probably a little bit of like this frantic anxiety and desperation, just crying out and determination. You're not going to stop me. I have to get to him. I have to tell him. And then relief and joy as he just jumps up. And as he comes to Jesus, probably a little bit of fear. And is everything that I've heard true? Is this the man that I can put my hope in? And then compassion on Jesus's side. And then complete joy from Bartimaeus as he receives his sight and begins to rejoice with the crowd. Man, what an amazing experience. These were real people. These are not stories. These are not fairy tales. Bartimaeus was a blind man that lived on the outside of Jericho. How awesome is this? He met the Messiah. He walked with him afterwards. He followed him. I hope that one day when we get to heaven, I will get to meet Bartimaeus and maybe even some of his disciples that he led even after this time. Okay, so hopefully that kind of paints a little bit of a picture. And now I'm going to share with you the story that I wrote. And again, it's just somebody listening to Bartimaeus reflect on how his life has been since Jesus has healed him. And he just kind of goes back and forth between the goodness and the difficulty and how Jesus is still enough. Hey, yeah, sit down. Well, yeah, today was a tough day. I mean, don't get me wrong. Ever since I met him, everything has been better, but I'm so thankful and I can't believe it. I mean, oh my goodness, my family can't believe it either. They went to look for me the other day, and when I wasn't in my normal place, they got some more friends and they couldn't find me. So they came over to the next town, and that's where I was. And they were just as blown away as me when they found me with him. When I left, I was just so excited. Like, I just left everything behind. I didn't take anything. It's completely crazy, and I know it's actually made things pretty interesting for sure. You would have thought that I would have grabbed that money in the bowl, but it just wasn't important. I began jumping and singing, dancing with everyone around. Man, my heart is just full right now thinking about it. In that moment, there was nothing in the world that I needed, only to be with him, near him. And yes, I'm still so truly thankful, but I'm hungry. And I don't have any extra clothes. Not to mention, I really don't know how to do anything. Just to help pack or get food in town, I need help. I'm like a little child. I truly have nothing to offer. I'm dependent at every turn and feel like I'm just in the way constantly. But when I go to him, he just smiles. His eyes have so much joy. He looks at me, puts his arm over my shoulder, and makes me feel perfectly safe and at home. It never points out how everyone learned how to do this when they were 12. I mean, come on, I was blind. But when I start looking around and see how great my friends are at setting up camp or making dinner, I start to feel lost again. I don't know where I belong, and most days I just try not to stick out. I don't want them to see how bad I am at everything. I already feel like I'm in the way. I just don't want them to kick me out, or I don't know, whatever that means. But then I crawl up to his feet. It seems fitting. I'm completely needy, just like a little baby. I look up into his eyes and I ask for some more to eat. But not loaves or fish. Although I did see him do that, and whoa, man, it was amazing. Just spectacular. There are no words to describe that moment, but that's not what I'm looking for. I want to feast on his words. When he speaks, it's like it's just me and him, and he knows exactly what I need. His words are they're like a spring in the desert. His words give so much life. After I'm with him for a while, at his feet, all I can think about is him. This feeling comes over me like I just ate the biggest meal and 2 helpings of dessert. I'm just so satisfied. My heart is just so satisfied and content just to be with him. I don't need anything else. Later on, I get back to trying to do something, and when my hands don't work right, I lose sight of how he is all I need, and I start to feel worthless again. But sometimes, it's hit or miss really, but every once in a while, when I'm coming to the realization that I'm the most needy of anyone around, I remember sitting in the heat, day in, day out, begging for anything that people would give me. When I was there, I was in the way. Nobody wanted to help me until he came along. Nobody cared until he came along. Jesus, Jesus, Son of David, have mercy on me. Jesus, help me see. Have mercy on me. And just like the first day, it happens all over again. I look up and there he is. He's always there. His hand reaching out. His heart full of compassion. His warm smile calling me in. And once again, I reach out and grab his hand. And we fully embrace and everything melts away. There's a peace and a joy that I never felt before him. And even though circumstances can be terrible and it looks like there's no way out. I mean, I don't get it. I don't know how it happens, but there's just this peace and just being with him. Like it's going to be okay. Even when it's not okay, it's going to be okay. When I finally settle in and my heart remembers that he loves me absolutely, he begins to speak over me. I chose you when you were alone, begging and living in a world of darkness. I chose you. I healed you when you couldn't see and you had to be led by hand everywhere you went. I healed you. I called you when you were all alone and crying out on the outside of town. I called you. I love you. You won't know a greater love than the love that I have for you. I love you. Yes, there is a lot that we need to work on. But look around, Bart. That's everyone. It's also not the point. Follow me, and let's show others how they can be healed and transform the world around us. One day we'll be together in my Father's kingdom, and all the wrong will be made right. All the pain, brokenness, everything will be as my Father intended. Oh, until that day, remember, you're gonna have tough days. But you know what won't ever happen again, Bart? You won't be the blind beggar on the outside of town. You are completely new. No matter how hard it is, you are not the same. So don't see yourself as something that I already took away. Instead, rejoice and tell everyone, I once was blind, but now I see. Have you ever struggled to trust the identity that God has given you? Do you still put your faith in your own goodness or your own strength? Could you imagine if you were blind Bartimaeus? You grew up blind, and then when you finally can see, you're just terrible at everything. And you start to believe that your value is in what you do instead of who God says you are. I mean, you're so valuable that God came to this earth, revealed himself through Jesus, and died on a cross for all of our sins, definitely, but for your sins, so that you could know and experience and be with God. Do you keep identifying with the old person that you used to be when Jesus has already paid for that and taken it away? Yes, Jesus gives us eternal life, but he also can give us freedom from the lies that we believe. He can give us freedom and victory from our past. I mean, the enemy and the world and your flesh, they want you to keep quiet. They want you to believe the lie that you're not worthy, that you're not good enough, that you're a waste of effort. They want to keep you from telling others of what you've seen and heard God do in your life. Can I just encourage you to take a moment and confess those things that you haven't truly surrendered to God? Trust Him that He will redeem those things. And instead of walking in blindness, you can tell people how you were healed of your blindness. In the New Testament, we are told that we're overcomers multiple times. It says in Revelation that we overcome by the power of the blood and by the word of our testimony. But if we don't have confidence in our testimony, if we are walking in the shame of our past, then how are we going to be overcomers? We have to surrender and give that to Jesus and allow Him to work in our weakness. Maybe today lands for you and you need to spend some time in prayer. Maybe you know somebody who needs to hear this, who needs to let go of the old man. They have eyes to see, but they're walking around like they're blind. Maybe you could share the story of blind Bartimaeus. And now he used to be blind, but his name's not blind Bartimaeus. It's just Bartimaeus, which actually means son of honor. That's what his name means. He's not a blind beggar anymore. He's a son of honor. And so are you. If you're in Jesus, you are a son or a daughter of honor. And He loves you. And so I hope that encourages you today. And also, who is it that needs to hear this story? And I just encourage you to go share this story with somebody. Last thing I said I would mention some prayer requests. I'll keep this really short. First off, our 9-month group is over in about a month. And as things kind of come to a halt, we'll go into a different season over the summer, but would you be praying for the people that are in our group, in their hearts, as they experience the transition from being in that group to now kind of having that freedom and a lot less structure? Would you also pray for my neighborhood? We call it Far West. It's in Austin, and in April, we're going to actually kind of gather a whole bunch of believers and go out into our neighborhood and pray for our neighbors, care for them, hopefully share the gospel and see people come to Jesus. And so if you could be praying for that, I would so appreciate it. And I'll let you know how that goes. We're going to be doing that on April 20th on a Saturday. All right, there's so many things that I could ask you to pray for, but I'll keep it short right there. I'm JT, and you've been listening to Seen and Heard, the podcast where we just can't help but tell others what we have seen and heard God do in our lives and in the lives of those around us. See you next time.